Welcome to the Carolina Digital Phone Learning Hub podcast, where we explore the essential tools and trends shaping businesses of all sizes. In each episode, we discuss the latest technologies and information designed to help you build and grow your business effectively. From innovative communication solutions to emerging digital strategies, our experts provide insights that empower you to navigate today's competitive landscape. Join us as we uncover actionable advice and resources to enhance your business operations and drive success.
All right, everybody, welcome back. Today, we're going to be taking a deep dive into something that might not sound super exciting at first, but it's actually really important.
Yeah, we're talking about call recording retention.
Yep, those phone conversations.
Yeah.
It's all about how to keep them safe, sound, and accessible when you need them. I mean, let's be honest. It might sound a little dry.
Kind of like sorting through that pile of receipts you've been putting off, right?
Exactly. But trust me, you do not want to be scrambling for that crucial recording from like 6 months ago when you suddenly need it.
Oh, absolutely. And you'd be surprised how often those recordings become absolutely crucial.
For sure. That's why we're partnering with Carolina Digital Phone for this deep dive to give you all the info you need.
It's fascinating, really, how much we rely on call recordings without even realizing it. I mean, people think they're just for resolving arguments, the whole he said, she said thing.
Yeah, it's the first thing that comes to mind. But there's got to be more to it, right?
Way more. I mean, just think about training new employees or analyzing those customer interactions to figure out where things could be better.
True. You can actually go back and hear exactly what happened. Okay, so let's back up a sec. Why even bother recording those calls in the first place?
You just hit on one of the biggest reasons, actually. Those recordings are like a time machine, right? You can go back, review exactly what was said, and that's gold.
So it's for, like, training, like listening back to calls to help improve.
Exactly. It's huge for stuff like that. And let's not forget the legal side of things. In disputes, having a recording can be the ultimate, I told you so.
Yeah, the evidence. Makes sense. Are there certain industries where these recordings are, like, super important?
Absolutely. Think about healthcare. They deal with a ton of personal information, right? And there are those regulations to think about.
Right. The Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act is all about protecting patient privacy, which makes sense.
Exactly. And in those situations, recordings are often mandatory. You need them to prove you're doing things by the book.
Wow. So it's not just about protecting yourself. It's about making sure you're following the rules.
You got it. But here's where things get interesting. Once you start recording, you got to figure out what to do with all those recordings. Where do they go? How long do you keep them?
Yeah, I mean, they can't just float around in cyberspace forever, can they?
Nope, they got to live somewhere. And that's where we get into call recording retention. Carolina Digital Phone, for instance, they give you 1 GB of free storage with their basic plan.
1 GB free? That sounds pretty generous. What's the catch?
Well, 1 GB is fine for some, maybe smaller businesses. But if you're on the phone a lot, especially if you're having longer calls.
You're going to hit that limit fast.
Right. Carolina Digital Phone has a handy table on their site, breaks it down by business and how many calls they typically make.
That's helpful. Our listeners can check that out in the show notes. It'll give you an idea of where you stand.
Once you hit that limit, the system automatically starts overwriting the oldest recordings to make space.
Wait, so that super important call with, like, a big client.
Yeah.
They could get wiped out just because I hit my limit.
Yep, it can happen. That's why it's important to think about long-term storage options.
So what happens when you need to keep those recordings around for a while, maybe even forever? What are your options there?
Right, that's where long-term storage solutions come in. Think about healthcare.
Right, they have those 6-year rules.
Exactly. And even if your industry doesn't have specific rules, you might still want to keep recordings for legal reasons.
Right, just in case? Or what about for internal audits, maybe just to look back and see how things were done?
Exactly. Carolina Digital Phone actually recommends using third-party providers.
Like who?
Well, Wasabi is a popular choice, or Amazon Web Services, which is often called AWS.
Okay, cloud storage. But isn't that, like, super expensive? I always associate cloud storage with those monthly fees.
You'd think so, but Wasabi is actually really affordable. It can be as low as $6.99 a month per terabyte.
Wow, that's way cheaper than constantly upgrading your storage when you run out of space.
Right. Plus, you don't have to worry about physically managing those hard drives.
Okay, so let's say I'm convinced. How do I even set up something like Wasabi? I'm not exactly a tech wizard.
I hear you. It might seem intimidating, but Carolina Digital Phone actually helps you through the whole process.
Oh, really? That's a relief. So what's involved?
Well, you'll create an account with Wasabi, set up what they call a bucket, which is basically like a folder for your recordings.
Okay, a bucket, got it. And then
Then you just got to integrate it with your Carolina Digital Phone system.
sounds kind of complicated.
It's not as bad as it sounds, and Carolina Digital Phone walks you through it. They even offer help setting up that Wasabi account for a small fee.
So they've got your back every step of the way. That's good to know. And what about all the legal stuff? Carolina Digital Phone must be pretty knowledgeable about all that, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. They know that compliance can be a major headache for businesses, especially those dealing with sensitive data.
So they don't just provide the tools, they help you use them in a way that keeps you out of trouble.
Exactly. They give you advice on stuff like data retention policies, how long you have to keep those recordings. It depends on your industry and where you are.
Makes sense. So it's like having a compliance expert on your team. Okay, let's talk about specifics. What are some of the legal things businesses need to think about when recording calls? Besides, getting permission to record in the first place.
Well, you hit on a big one there, consent. The laws are different depending on where you are and even where the other person on the call is.
Oh, wow. That's more complicated than I thought.
Some places require everyone on the call to agree to be recorded. Others just need you to agree if you're the one recording.
So you really got to know the rules. What happens if you mess that up?
You could get into some serious legal trouble, so definitely don't skip that step. Another big one is data security.
Right. Keeping those recordings safe.
Exactly. It's not just about storing them securely, it's also about making sure no one can access them who shouldn't.
So like strong passwords, encryption, that kind of thing.
You got it. You need to control who can see and download those recordings. If you don't protect that data, you're looking at fines, a damaged reputation.
Not to mention, what if someone's personal information gets out?
Exactly. It's a big deal.
Yeah.
And then you've got industry-specific regulations.
Right, healthcare and all that.
If you're in healthcare, you need to be extra careful about compliance.
So Carolina Digital Phone can help with all this.
Oh, yeah. They've got compliance storage options. They even offer training for your staff.
So you don't have to be a legal expert to figure it all out. Okay, let's shift gears for a sec. What about actually getting to those recordings once they're stored?
Great point. It's one thing to keep them safe, but what good are they if you can't find them when you need them?
Yeah, it's like having a hidden treasure chest but losing the map.
Carolina Digital Phone has put a lot of thought into how you access and retrieve those recordings. They get that time is often a factor, especially in legal stuff.
So how does it work?
Well, first, you got to know that how you access the recordings depends on where they are. You got recordings in that initial 1 GB of free storage, and then you've got the ones stored externally with Wasabi.
Makes sense. Let's start with the recordings that are in that initial storage.
Those are easy. You access them through Carolina Digital Phone's online portal. It's super user-friendly. You can search by date, time, phone number.
That's cool. So I could search for a call where we talked about a certain project.
Yep.
What about the recordings stored with Wasabi? Is that more complicated?
That's a great question, and it's a little different because we're talking about a completely separate system. Wasabi is the storage space, but you still manage and access everything through Carolina Digital Phone.
So Carolina Digital Phone basically acts as a bridge between the two.
Exactly. You don't have to switch between different logins or anything. It's all centralized, which is nice.
Makes sense. So how do you get to those externally stored recordings?
Well, you still have those great search functions, dates, all that. The main difference is how you get the recording itself.
How's it different?
Since the recordings are stored off-site with Wasabi, it takes a little longer to get them. It's not instant like with those in the included storage.
But I click on it, and then I gotta wait for it to download.
Exactly. Think of it like requesting a file from your cloud storage. It might take a few minutes, but you'll get a notification when it's ready.
Okay, so a little patience is required. But hey, that's a small price to pay for knowing those recordings are safe and sound.
Absolutely. And don't forget, Carolina Digital Phone has amazing customer support. If you ever have trouble, they're just a phone call away.
Love it.
Mm-hmm.
But what about deleting recordings? Do you just keep them forever?
Good question. You definitely need a system for getting rid of recordings you don't need anymore, especially with that external storage. You don't want to waste money keeping stuff you'll never use.
So Carolina Digital Phone has thought of everything. Storage, access, organization, even deletion.
They really have. And it seems like they understand that businesses have different needs, whether you're a small operation or a huge company with tons of regulations to follow.
Speaking of regulations, we haven't even talked about the security of those recordings.
You're right. That's a whole other can of worms. And that's exactly what we'll be digging into after the break, so stay tuned.
I'm Reed Plumber, owner of Fleet Plumber here in Greensboro. We are Greensboro's largest specialty retail store. We sell everything from women's clothes to grills to Christmas to fireplace. We found Carolina Digital Phone just by Googling, and we were very impressed with the 5-star ratings. I don't think I've ever seen another company with more 5-star Google ratings than Carolina Digital Phone. We were in an emergency situation. Our phone lines were down. Our previous provider was not providing any help. We were down for 3 days. And they went above and beyond. We called them, they were here the next day and had our new phone system installed by the time we opened. It was incredible. Not only did Carolina Digital Phone provide us with incredible new features, they were able to integrate their cloud-based features and software with our probably 40-year-old analog paging system. They took everything that we needed and made it just work. Every single time we've got a question, they solve it, and it's just easy.
Welcome back. Before the break, we were talking about how important security is when you're dealing with call recordings.
Oh yeah, security's huge. You got to keep those recordings safe from prying eyes. It's non-negotiable, especially with all the sensitive info they often have.
Right. You're talking customer data, financial details, even health records. Right?
Exactly. It's like having a vault full of confidential stuff. You wouldn't just leave it unlocked, would you?
Definitely not. So what does Carolina Digital Phone do to keep these recordings secure?
Well, they've got this multi-layered security approach. It's designed to protect your recordings from every angle, whether they're in Carolina Digital Phone system or stored externally, like with Wasabi.
Okay, I like the sound of that. Break it down for me. What kind of security measures are we talking about?
For starters, any data that goes between your phone system and Carolina Digital Phone servers, it's all encrypted.
So even if someone, intercepted that data, they couldn't read it?
Nope. Not without the decryption key. It's like sending those recordings in a secret code.
I like that analogy. And is that encryption just for data that's moving around, or does it apply to recordings that are already stored too?
It covers both. For stored recordings, they use what's called AES 256-bit encryption.
Okay, but what does that mean for someone who's not a tech expert?
Basically, it's like super strong encryption. It uses a 256-bit key, which means there are trillions upon trillions of possible combinations.
So impossible to crack?
Pretty much, even for the best hackers out there. But Carolina Digital Phone doesn't stop there. They've also got strict access controls.
So not just anyone in my company can listen to those recordings.
Exactly. They use something called role-based access controls. So different people get different levels of access depending on their job and if they actually need to see those recordings.
So a customer service rep might be able to see recordings of their own calls, but not calls from, say, the accounting department.
You got it. It's all about limiting access to only those who absolutely need it. And that helps minimize the risk of someone getting in who shouldn't.
Smart. What about recordings that are stored externally, like with Wasabi? Does that have the same level of security?
That's a good question, and the answer is yes. Wasabi takes security just as seriously. They've got their own encryption and access controls, so those recordings are safe and sound.
So it's like double the protection. I mean, it's a big deal if something goes wrong, right?
Huge deal. Data breaches can be a disaster for a business, financially and for their reputation. So choosing a provider that makes security a top priority is super important.
Sounds like Carolina Digital Phone checks all the boxes. They're user-friendly, they help with compliance, and they're super secure.
They've definitely simplified things for businesses. So what does all this mean for our listeners?
Yeah, that's a lot to take in. What are the key takeaways here?
The big one. Don't wait to think about call recording retention. The time to plan is now, before you find yourself needing a recording that's gone missing or that you can't get to.
That's great advice. Better to be safe than sorry.
Right. If you think about it now, you can avoid a lot of problems later. And remember, Carolina Digital Phone has tons of resources to help you get started. Articles, guides, and their support team is fantastic.
It seems like Carolina Digital Phone has all the answers. They help with storage, retention policies, access, and they're super secure.
They really have thought of everything, and it seems like they work with businesses of all sizes, which is great.
So as we wrap things up, what's the one piece of advice you'd give our listeners?
Simple. Don't put it off. Start thinking about your call recording retention plan today.
Couldn't agree more. And remember, there's help out there if you need it.
Exactly. It's about finding the right solution for your business, one that works for you and keeps you on the right side of the law.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground today. We've talked about why businesses record calls, the different ways to store them, how important security and compliance are.
And we even touched on the ethics of it all.
Hopefully our listeners are feeling a little more informed about this whole thing. It's something a lot of businesses don't think about, but it's really important.
Totally agree. And don't forget, there are resources out there to help.
All right, folks, that's it for today's deep dive. We hope you found it helpful.
Thanks for joining us on the Carolina Digital Phone Learning Hub podcast. We're eager to hear from you. Whether you have questions about today's topic, suggestions for future discussions, or just want to chat about technology and business, we're here to help. Reach out by emailing inquiry@carolinadigitalphone.com, calling us at 336-544-4000, or clicking the Get Started link at carolinadigitalphone.com. We look forward to talking with you.